In 2001, I got a particularly awful cold that kept me home for a few days from work, with little energy to do much else besides play video games. It so happened that I had just bought Bulletstorm for PS3. If you've never played Bulletstorm, it's not particularly memorable. It's centered on a generic, gruff, foul-mouthed protagonist, marooned on a planet chasing after his former commander, who is also generic, gruff, and foul-mouthed. There's a leash gimmick where you use a whip-like weapon to throw enemies around into environmental hazards. Besides that, it was fun, but nothing worth writing home about. But as I was sick that weekend, it really helped to take my mind off otherwise feeling like trash. I played for long enough that I needed to recharge my controller, but only had a single short USB cable. So naturally, I sat all of 3 feet back from the TV and console while it charged and kept playing. It's one of my favorite memories of gaming as an adult. It's only fitting then that I've been sick this last week, in case you couldn't tell by the sound of my voice, and I've missed several days of work. What better time to play Evil West, a game that is strangely reminiscent of Bulletstorm, but still manages to hold your attention long enough to want to complete it. Story and design. For a third-person shooter with what could have otherwise been a very forgettable hero, they did take their time to flesh out the relationships you see throughout the game, as well as the lore surrounding the creatures you face off with. The protagonist, Jesse Rentier, is this run-of-the-mill but tough-as-nails hero. But that isn't necessarily a bad thing, because he isn't dropping cheesy one-liners every other minute. I also love the setting, the Old West, but mixing it with vampire lore and steampunk machines is a great choice. The villains seem to be well done also, although Felicity, the main antagonist, isn't present as much as you'd expect. You pick up hers and others' notes as collectibles along the way, and slowly her plan becomes more and more apparent. They definitely capitalize on the creepy child vibe, like Megan or Chucky. I do think they could have done a little more to establish the Rentier Institute at the start of the game, with it being destroyed the first 30 minutes, and not really letting you explore its history. Supporting characters like Virgil, Emilia, and Edgar are also put to good use. I especially liked Virgil as the bumbling engineer looking to help you upgrade your arsenal. It would have been nice to know more backstory between Edgar and his long history, as it's implied he's old enough to retire and has been with the Institute quite a while. Jesse's father as well. Maybe hearing how they got the Institute started would have been a good addition. Gameplay. Right from the start, something feels unique about the game based on how you proceed through the intro. For a third-person shooter, you don't actually do a lot of shooting. The game makes a point to ensure you use all your available arsenal, like your gauntlet and other tools, not just your revolver and rifle. Much like Bulletstorm, the gauntlet is a big focus in both melee combat and upgrades. Honestly, I really enjoy this, as it's usually pretty easy to forget about 1 or 2 weapons in any game, but this game makes a point to ensure you're using a wide variety. For example, the Leecher, a massive enemy that has a huge shield covering the entire front of their body, is vulnerable from behind, but it works out better if you focus on destroying their shield first. This is done with both the shotgun and melee attacks from the gauntlet. Alternatively, the vampire Highborn needs a lot of distance between you and them if you're going to survive. The rifle or crossbow shots are a good way of hitting their weak spots. One downside to this part is that the rifle and crossbow both take advantage of the haptic feedback in the DualSense controller. Now, this could be a good thing depending on how you like haptic feedback, but it did get a little annoying, especially when you're running out of bullets and need to reload, as the R2 trigger gets especially heavy and hard to press. I do enjoy haptic feedback, especially in shooters, notably Ratchet and Clank, but this got a little tiresome. Also, you don't aim down the crosshairs of your pistol or shotgun like you might expect, making them more clumsy than I cared for. Visuals. While I don't think this game is a good example of just what the current gen consoles are capable of, it holds its own. Initially, I didn't care for the color palette, but after adjusting my gamma just a little bit, it actually has a decent look. It is the Old West after all, so that burnt sienna color theme is very present and persistent, but it's not enough to bring down my opinion of the game. Some of the assets are reused multiple times, like the broken parts of the airship that is downed at the manor at the beginning. It's fine, and while some of the opening hours look a little drab, it's still engaging, especially once you're out there exploring more environments. I really appreciate that the action points that you climb over or interact with are highlighted by default, which made said exploration fun without any frustration. There was one level that I did find annoying, the swamp section, when you're looking for Edgar. It's dark enough that you can't really appreciate much of the level. I'm playing on a PS5, so I can't say what an Xbox or PC experience might be like, but while I'm content with the visuals, maybe the enemies could have been where they put more color. They also share that same brown color scheme that's persistent everywhere, so naturally a little bit of their detail is lost. which is a shame because when examining the lore entries on each of them, you can see they put a lot of work into refining them. Repetitiveness. There is some repetitiveness in the game, which by the end I found myself just wanting to finish. I appreciate that it's not another open world game that would have added to what a lot of folks have dubbed the open world fatigue. But the linear approach to each level, coupled with the predictability of what was coming next, did steal some of the game's shine. Like I said, I've been home all week, so it was easy for me to pick up and play, but I could see it losing a lot of people along the way. Evil West reminds me of Bulletstorm because it's an entertaining but otherwise forgettable game. It's not bad by any means, but it does seem to try and do a lot without much depth to it. Generic protagonist, mundane color palette, repetitive level structure. My old roommate and I used to have a scale for how we'd recommend movies and games to one another. Basically, we broke it into 3 sections. The first and lowest level was where we placed all bad games and movies. This made up the first 10%. The next section, that we called entertaining, was comprised of the middle 80%. And the final 10% was reserved for really good stuff. Think God of War 2018 or Winter Soldier. In that middle section, we usually say if something fell closer to one end or the other. For me, Evil West falls into that middle section of entertaining, but on the middle to higher end of it. Probably not entirely worth the full price, but definitely worth a sale or borrowing it from a friend. I enjoyed it as much as I did due in large part to the nostalgia it brought me from when I was sick all those years ago, but I can understand if others played a few hours and didn't pick it up again. If we're giving grades, I'd say it's fair to call this game a 7.5 out of 10. Hope you've enjoyed this review, and I wanted to mention something for this channel going forward. A few years ago, I started this as a place to talk about sobriety, mental health, politics, and video games. For years now, I really wanted to do a few things to give back to the substance use and harm reduction communities, and I've recently found a volunteer opportunity that lets me do just that. I've also found another creative outlet for my mental health that I'm working on and hopefully will have something of merit produced in the next 12 months. All that to say, I'm probably just going to focus on gaming here on the channel for the foreseeable future. Barring anything major, I'll focus mostly on newer titles and reviews, but since I'm buying these with my own money, they won't be day one or anything like that. There will be the occasional retro thrown in. Hope your new year is off to a great start for you and your loved ones, and I'll see you next time.